Look at what they did to America Chavez. What is this? This card is completely changed. Man, I'm blown away at this change and all the changes here. We have a crazy balance patch on our hands, and that's why I'm actually making a video on it. I don't usually do this, but this one was so monumental, I felt like I had to talk about it. And in particular, America Chavez, because this card has been run in like all the top decks, right? That was America Chavez thing. You have a deck that has 11 good cards, you throw in America Chavez to make it a little bit more consistent. It's not really deck thinning, but you get to those important key tools in your deck a little bit sooner, and that's why everybody loved running this card. But you didn't necessarily love running this card to play America Chavez, because at the end of the day, she was just 9 power and you drew her on turn 6. So that's why they made the change. And I think in a roundabout way, it is kind of healthy for the metagame. You know, this deck thinning to make those decks a little bit more consistent, maybe this actually hurts them a little bit more and takes them a little bit down in their win rates. I'm looking at Loki potentially, always was running America Chavez so that you drew Loki a little bit sooner. Those crazy combo decks. I mean, I don't know if there's going to be that much of a change to those decks' win rates, but there's going to be a huge shift in how you deck build in Marvel Snap, and I think it's going to be quite fascinating. But then we have the new America Chavez, and that is a 2/3 on reveal. The top card of your deck gets +2 power. Now, they made this change because it's a basic ability, and you get America Chavez pretty much when you start your Marvel Snap journey. So I think it makes sense to make it basic like this, but at the same time, I don't know if she's going to be good or not. It's kind of underwhelming. Okoye gives +1 power to your entire deck, right? And she's a 2/2. America Chavez getting +2, but you could use Howard to see what card you're going to draw. And if that card is Brood, that's a lot of power. I don't know. This is just the craziest change I feel like I've ever seen. I mean, we've known America Chavez since the beginning, the dawn of Snap. And now she is no more. She's a completely different card. I have a feeling a lot of people are going to be frustrated with this change. A lot of folks loved America Chavez the way she was, rightfully so. It's a cool card, your little turn 6 hero that flies into your hand. But I don't know, time will tell. Let me know in the comments below how you feel about this America Chavez change. I don't think we're going to see her played nearly as much as before with this new version. But maybe there's some fun decks brewing up. I don't know. It's a tough pill to swallow, but there you go. That is America Chavez, the new America Chavez. All right, let's get to the rest of these balance changes, including the next big one, which is Alioth. My goodness, dude. Look at Alioth getting hit again, this time going to a 6/2, and now he's only going to destroy all unrevealed cards here. So it's still the same thing at this location, right? And if your opponent has unrevealed cards, you're going to swallow them all up and destroy them, and it's going to be great. But now there's a huge emphasis on having priority going into that final turn when you play your Alioth. Because if they are face up, if your opponent has priority and they play their cards first, Alioth does nothing, dude. Absolutely nothing. The only thing he can hope to do is if your opponent is running Invisible Woman, which now Invisible Woman has the most nastiest counter in Alioth because, you know, those cards don't reveal until the end of the game, and your opponent can play Alioth on turn 6 and just eat them all up. Eat all those unrevealed cards up, because now it doesn't matter what turn it is. There's no like turn focus on when you play Alioth. It's just if they're unrevealed. So all those cards, Invisible Woman, if they were played even as early as turn 2, they're going to get swallowed up, which is kind of nasty. But for the most part, this is a pretty big nerf. The emphasis on priority, I think, is going to balance this card out. So when you're looking at things like Ghost, you don't want to run Ghost with Alioth. That'd be terrible unless you Viper it over. Annihilus, I actually think, takes a bit of a hit. I'm playing a lot of Annihilus, and Alioth helps out a lot on that final turn, because turn 5 you Annihilus, turn 6 you Alioth. And it's not always guaranteed that you'll have priority, because if those negative power things that you sent over weren't sent over and just destroyed, well, you might not have priority going into that final turn. Professor X kind of takes a hit as well, because you lock up that one lane, sure, that's great, but the other two, your opponent might be winning, and then if you don't have priority going into turn 6, then you're kind of screwed. And lastly, Mr. Negative might get a little bit of a buff from this, because now you can flip it to be a 2/6, and it's going to destroy anything. You can play it on turn 5, turn 6, whatever. Maybe there's something there. That could be pretty nasty. But altogether, this is a pretty significant nerf, in my opinion, with Alioth, but it still holds its identity. It's still going to feel really nasty when it, you know, snipes your cards, because you didn't have priority going into turn 6. It still creates those checkmate scenarios. So we still have to watch out for it. but I like this course of action rather than completely killing the card. All right, next up is Luke Cage. Luke Cage is now changed to only affect the location he's played at. That's crazy, dude. That's crazy. He used to throw Luke Cage out anywhere, and then you'd, keep the power of all of your cards. All those affliction decks get completely wrecked, or just whatever else. Like, we can even look at High Evo getting a buff from this, but High Evo affects specific locations. So I think what you're doing now is you're holding onto your Luke Cage for that moment where you know your opponent is stacking that negative power. And those are cards like Cyclops, right? Dishing out that negative power at a location. Man-Thing also doing that. Hazmat, I went back and forth with Hazmat. I think this actually kind of helps Hazmat players because you can put your Luke Cage, where you need to save that power. And then your opponent can only react to one location. So Hazmat's almost guaranteed to return value now, when before Luke Cage was just an absolute nasty counter. Also, if we look at Selene coming later this month, this is a pretty big buff for her because now your opponent has to line up the Luke Cage and the Selene affected card. And maybe if you throw over Goblin. So I think I like this change. I think it's a little bit healthier. Luke Cage was just shutting down way too much. And now as a 2/3 and, still retaining his ability, but you have to be a little bit more careful about where you play him. I think it's very fair. So while I do think this is a pretty substantial change, I think it's all right. Time will tell. We'll see. I think they kind of said in the comments that they might go back on this one, or they're going to see how it plays out because they don't want to entirely kill the tech card that is Luke Cage. But next up is Ravonna going from a 2/1 to a 2/3. I think this is a fantastic change for this card. And my goodness, it is about time that Ravonna starts popping off because she just has everything going for her. She is discounting so many key cards. Now we're looking at Cerebro 3 potential. Just amazing value. Now you're discounting your Mystique and your Cerebro. Your Ravonna's retaining the buff from those respective cards. You can bash them and all this stuff. It's going to be so good. And then we're also talking about, discounting those goblins and all that. Just having more power on the stick that actually provides the discounts helps a ton. I expect Ravonna to be even that much better. Hopefully, time will tell. But I do love that they're kind of, giving her a little bit of love because she's such an interesting card, an interesting deck building option. Next up after that, we have ELSA. Now, this one's a little bit tricky to wrap your brain around, but I did get some developer confirmations on this. So essentially, before you had to play the card that fills the location to get the +2 power. It didn't matter where it was. Now, it has to be at ELSA's location to retain the +2 power, but it doesn't matter if it's the 4th card played. So the easiest example is you play ELSA on turn 2 and you play Brood at the same location on turn 3. Previously, that wouldn't do anything. You wouldn't get the ELSA buff because it's the Broodling that's filling the location and you didn't play the Broodling. Well, now, because you played Brood, he filled the location. The Broodlings won't get any bonus power, but Brood himself will get +2. To further elaborate on that, if you play Ultron and the drones fill a location elsewhere that has ELSA Bloodstone in it, the drones won't get +2 power, but Ultron, all the way at whatever location he is, will get +2 power from ELSA's buff. So that's how it's going to work now. I think it's a pretty significant change. I think I'm leaning towards a pretty savage nerf, but time will tell if that's actually helpful or not. You can't stack the same way that you used to, and I think the decks that take a hit is especially bounce decks with Mysterio. Before you could get all 3, the Mysterio and the clones, to get the ELSA Bloodstone buff, and now that's just not a combo that you can rely on. Yeah, he can fill up one location, get 1 buff, but that is a significant nerf from the previous +6 that he was getting. And then Loki as well was running a lot of ELSA Bloodstone because you're playing so many cards. You get a lot of buffs. Well, now it's not that reliable. You can get maybe 1-2 buffs out of her if you're able to bounce something back. It's still good with Kitty Pryde, still good with Angela, but I think this is a much more niche card now than before. Before she was so flexible, you could put her in a lot of decks. Now I see like maybe the bounce list running her, and that is about it. So maybe Hitmonkey still is viable with her, but I felt like his deck also takes a hit because you were playing so many cards on turn 6 to get that Hitmonkey to crazy power levels. And now all those cards you play aren't getting the same power output as they were previously. Anyways, it's an interesting change. Like all of these, let me know in the comments below. But we have all these changes as well, and I'm just going to briefly go over these. So Kitty Pryde gains 1 power. She's going back to a 1/1. I think that's a pretty healthy change. She fell really out of favor, and I think she could use the help since her scaling is back down to only +1 power every time she bounces back. Mind Stone changed from drawing 2 stones from your deck to drawing 2 1-cost cards, which of course could still end up being 2 stones, but maybe there's some interesting deck building potential here where you can draw other 1-costs that you put in your deck. Might be good. Maybe you don't put any 1-cost and then it still guarantees that it draws the stones. I don't see that as a nerf or a buff. I think it could go both ways. Arrow has been changed, and my boy Stegoron. Both these cards getting +1 power. Arrow's ability, the text changed. It's not really a change to her ability. I'm going to explain that in a second. But basically, these 2 cards got +1 power. Oh no, Stegoron's power is falling off. Whoops, that's my bad. But there you go. I'm stoked. I love Stegoron. You guys know I love Stegoron. A 4/6 Stegoron. Let's go. We discount with Sabu. It's a 3/6. That is great. And Arrow, it's nice to see a little bit of love to Arrow. She used to be played so much and not nearly as much anymore. So that is nice to see. I hope they see increased play rates. Some of the other changes, some of these are pretty big to understand. So Juggernaut, and this kind of plays into the movement cards and their abilities moving forward. So I'm going to start there. Movement abilities will now only affect revealed cards unless explicitly saying so. So Juggernaut is that one exception, and kind of Arrow's change in text also alludes that she is changed as well. But Juggernaut specifically says move away all enemy cards played here this turn, including unrevealed cards. Okay, everything else will not move unrevealed cards. Those cards that you want to look out for are Stegoron. He's not slapping away any unrevealed cards. And then also Spider-Man is another one off the top of my head that will not flip over any unrevealed cards. He'll still move himself, but if there's only an unrevealed card there, he ain't moving it. But if it is revealed, he will. That's just how the move mechanic is going to work moving forward, which is a pretty significant change to understand. And then you also have Shadow King losing a point of power. I think this is totally reasonable. This card has been doing really well. It's a good tech option. Finally, it took forever. It required a lot of buffs, but now, with so many increases to power to certain cards, we're looking at Shaw coming out around the corner. Yeah, Shadow King probably needed a step back, and it's not really that bad of one because you're not necessarily using Shadow King for his power output, but rather his effect, which is still intact. And then you got the Ebony Blade now gaining the ability ongoing, can't be destroyed, and its power can't be reduced. That could be significant. I mean, it definitely is good against Shang-Chi and Shadow King. I mean, those are the 2 main counters to the Blade. So maybe Black Knight finds a little bit more value. I do like that change. I still think the card is super clunky. And then you got Phoenix Force. Finally, the bug is fixed, so look out for Phoenix Force, because now when you create a copy, when you resurrect multiple men and you move, you can move the copies as well. So you got a bunch of multiple men out there, boom, they're all moving everywhere. It's going to be crazy. There's going to be so many men all over the board because of Phoenix Force. So look out for that. That's going to be very, very strong. And then there's a whole whack of cards that have had their text changed, but you can check that out in the link in the description where the full patch notes are. So you can just read up on it. We got albums, we got emotes, we got text changes, we got balance changes. We're going to have some data mines soon, which I'm going to get you guys as soon as possible. It's a crazy day. It's a crazy day for Snap, and I wanted to cover it really quickly with you guys here today. So thank you so much for listening to me talk about this patch, and I will catch you guys next time.